Hi, and welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So I will say that if I had to pick one indicator that I can only look at one thing, I would probably pick ADX because of all the different ways that it can help me. But I want to make sure it can be a really overwhelming indicator. If someone looks at it, there's three lines associated with it because you got the DI lines and the ADX. I mean, what does it all mean? I'm going to try and really simplify how to use ADX to tell us what to do. All right, so let's just look at this agenda. We want to go through and talk about, normally what I'm doing with ADX is I'm trying to shrink a list down by using ADX qualities and saying, okay, I'm only looking for the ones that meet what I'm looking for on an ADX basis. But the other thing you want to use ADX for is to tell you what to do. And that's what we want to do, is define that by time frame, because you want to use it in multiple time frames. So first order of business is looking for strong trends. And then we also want to look for low ADX conditions, which I'll explain as we get into the lesson. But what we want to do on those is, if we've got a strong ADX, we want to look for a pullback. If we've got low ADX, we want to buy breakouts. And I'm going to show you exactly how I would do that and how it works in multiple time frames, which is a little bit more complicated. And then we'll go through the stock requests that came through. So let's go ahead and get into this lesson now. Okay, what I'm going to do is start with this ADX explanation and start it really simply. And then I'm going to make it a little bit more complicated once we start looking at an individual stock as an example. But it's still, if you follow the basic premise, I think it can come pretty easy. Now, anyone who's taken my course would know that I use ADX in so many different ways. There's so many different aspects to it. However, we can boil it down to two key things. And what I want to make sure that you see here is, I've got on the left side, I've got a low ADX condition. And that's where, so the first thing I actually want you to think about is that every time price makes a peak on a move to the upside, as an example, you want to look and see what is taking place with the ADX line. Is the ADX line making a peak above 25 and preferably above 30? But since I use an 8 ADX and not a 14 ADX, sometimes I like to see it above 30 and not just above the 25 level. Now, but if you notice in this instance, this low ADX condition, each peak is not allowing the ADX, it's not strong enough to get the ADX above 25. So we know we don't have a strong trend. We have a low trend strength or a low ADX condition, because ADX is essentially telling us the trend strength, and low means that we have low trend strength. All right, so in this example on the left, when we have low ADX, what does that mean? That means we wait for a breakout. We play breakouts. Okay, that is what we're looking for on that time frame. If I have a time frame that has low ADX and has gone long enough, so a low ADX condition is essentially where we go 25 to 30 bars, any time frame, 25 to 30 bars. Once you stay low enough where this stays down for 25 to 30 bars, and you have a pattern that you can draw, meaning you can put in trend lines. So in this case, it would just be a rectangular pattern. Sometimes it's an ascending triangle. Sometimes it's a standard triangle like this, a symmetrical triangle. But as long as you can draw trend lines on price and it's been below for 25 to 30 bars, we are looking for a breakout. All right. Now, on the right side, we have strong ADX, and that means every time price makes a peak, in this instance, makes a strong move to the upside, the ADX actually makes a peak above 25. This is our reference line, 25. So it's well above the 25 level. In fact, in this case, you could almost say it was up around 40 or 50, right? Now, when we have a strong ADX condition, we're looking to play pullbacks. All right, it's that simple. We don't buy breakouts. We don't buy strength. We look for a pullback when the ADX is strong. All right, so this is giving us a reference for how strong the trend is, but it's not helping us with the timing yet. right? We need for this to kind of, it's almost like an overbought, oversold oscillator saying we got a really strong move to the upside, but we got to wait for it to pull back a little bit. That's essentially what this is doing. We use price to watch the pullback. And it's okay if the ADX drops down under 25 a little bit during this decline. I don't like it to go all the way back down here most of the time, but as long as it stays in the 20s, it's okay for it to bleed back down below the 25 level. The strongest trend conditions are when it holds 25 through a full pullback in a full correction period. All right, but those are the two main things that we want to start out with. That's low ADX by breakouts, strong ADX by pullbacks. All right, let's go into the actual stock example. Okay, so I've got the chart of Rambus up. In fact, I've got the quad chart, the grid, monthly, weekly, and daily. All right, those are the main ones we want to focus on. So we're going to start with the monthly because notice what happened. We made a move to the upside, strong move to the upside. You see how strong this reading was? You see how big of a move that made? So what are we looking to do when we see that? We're looking for a pullback. We look for a pullback on this time frame, right? So we want to look for a pullback towards, near, or at the rising 18 MA on that time frame. Sometimes it'll come in between the two, just like this. As long as these lines are rising, that is considered a pullback. Sometimes it'll just pull back just above or just around the 18. So it's in and around the area of the 18, which is rising. So we have the strong move to the upside, confirmed by ADX, and then we get a pullback. In this case, the pullback doesn't cause this to drop down much at all. It stays really strong through that. Now, on this time frame, at the same time that this pullback is taking place, we have this move going on this time frame. And look at what happens. We form a low ADX condition. Do you see that? We spent several weeks consolidating, working our way around, staying low. Now, if I'm drawing trend lines on this, it's a little tricky. I mean, I could kind of draw a horizontal line here and do something like that and say, okay, I've got an ascending triangle, right? I mean, I can do that, no problem. Or, again, anyone who's looked at my 1, 2, 3 reversal, you can see we broke the downtrend line, we moved up, we came back and tested the 18 in this example. So I'm going to put in another trend line right here. So in reality, we're using the same level depending on how you do it. I would view this as the way I would probably look at it as the start. It was the completion of a 1, 2, 3. And it would also be the kickoff move for a low ADX breakout play. Right? So we have low ADX in place and we've formed a good enough reversal that we can look for a breakout in this instance because it's a low ADX condition. Now, what is this breakout doing for us? It's getting us in on the bigger time frame trend. Okay, we're buying a pullback on this time frame, but we're buying a breakout on this time frame. But I'm using the same thing that I had on that prior little cheat sheet, which is I'm buying a breakout on this time frame and I'm buying a pullback on this time frame. Now, I'm not necessarily buying at the low on this time frame, but I've bought the pullback and I'm waiting for the lower time frame to tell us when to get in. Now, if we look at what's taken place since that breakout, we've had pullback, pullback, pullback. Prior to each one of these pullbacks, look at the strength of the ADX. You see how powerful of an ADX signal this is? This is so strong that even during the pullbacks, the ADX really isn't even pulling back. So on each one of these pullbacks, we want to be looking for an entry on the smaller time frame. Now, if we go to the smaller time frame, let's look at those 3 entries. Here's 1, here's 2, and here's 3. Now, I'm not saying that you're actually going to get in right at the low or where there's a circle. What I'm saying is that as this is approaching the area of the 18 in each time frame, look at what's showing up here. Low ADX, low ADX, low ADX. Now, because this had a long low ADX condition where it stayed down for a long enough time, we would have been looking to buy the breakout in this one, okay? But the other 2, we weren't there long enough. You see how it just dropped down very quickly? But we had MACD helping us with the signal here. We know that there wasn't a lot of strength on the sell side. We know we want to be looking to be a buyer when this is low. All right, now, so we would use the MACD in this instance, and we would also use the MACD in this instance where we have a low ADX condition, but it's not long enough or low enough to buy a breakout. We're still kind of buying a reversal pattern. In these two instances, it's more of a reversal play, and in this instance, it's a breakout play. So I wanted to make sure I covered this and gave you a really good idea of how to keep it simple. Use pullbacks when you have a strong trend, use breakouts when you have a low ADX condition, and if you have those two things and you keep them straight, you can do it in multiple time frames. All right, let's go ahead and get into the stocks now. If you're enjoying the content, please hit that like button and also subscribe so you can get notified on any future videos coming out. So what I wanted to do is just make sure you're aware that on Wednesday, May 31st from 4 to 5 Eastern Time, I'm going to be doing a live webinar. It's free. I'm doing it for my subscribers, but I'm allowing pretty much anyone to register for this so that they can see some of the things we talk about. I'm going to talk about the current market and go through some ideas and then answer questions related to my approach to the market and trend and momentum indicators. So if you have an interest, go to rabelstockresearch.com/webinar. Okay, so as we get going here, normally I go through a specific index in depth. What I wanted to do today is show some of the different functionality of ACP that I think is pretty cool. So I've got 11 charts up, all right, and these are all the sector charts. And all I've done is I've got the weekly chart up with 18 and 40, my moving averages that I like to use. They're simple moving averages. And then I've put the relative strength line relative to the S&P up for each one of these charts. And I think, you know, what I've done is I've drawn a line in that shows from the beginning of the year how each index, each of these sector indexes have traded on a relative basis. So I find it kind of interesting. I mean, XLY is basically slightly positive. It's moved up off the low. I would call it you know, it is on the upside, right? But not dramatically so. But if we look at the XLC and the XLK, those are really the only indexes that are the sectors that are up for the year. So I know you've been hearing this, but it's just good to see it in black and white when you can look at these charts. I think it's a really good way. I would have a page like this that you can look at and give you a really good sense. So one of the things I like to do is I like to draw trend lines on price and also on the relative strength line. So if I get a move to the upside here, I want to see this confirmation. I really want to see confirmation because I don't just want to buy a price pattern. I want to buy something that's going to be a leader. A leader will tend to have a trend relative to the S&P that's to the upside. So you want to draw these trend lines on price, but you also want to draw them in on their relative strength line as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you can do that, so like as an example here, if this comes up and breaks out above this, it's not as meaningful to me if this doesn't break out above its trend line, right? So just kind of, I think it's a good little tool for you to go through and look at a significant number of charts or a specific area that we want to look at. Now, I'm going to take one more brief second and show you a different example. So this is actually all these same charts on a 10-minute basis with a MACD. All right. When I used to do day trading, I'd have 12 stocks up or maybe 10 stocks up at the same time looking at their MACD patterns. And I think it's kind of interesting. Now, I recognize this was right at the end of the day. So that was an XLV at a zero line reversal. Same thing for the XLP with a zero line reversal. But let's just give me a different example. Let's say I'm looking at all these and I'm trying to find, are there any patterns setting up? Look at what the XLK did. And in fact, the XLY did the same thing. Both of these had 40 to 18 bounces on their 10-minute charts in the afternoon, right? So as this is pulling back, we'd go and look at the 10-minute chart and see we hit the 40, we pull back to the 18, we've got a pinch play, and we have room to the zero line to maybe take a little trade to the upside. And then what I would do is from there, the ones that have an interesting pattern, I would then go down and look at the intraday chart, and you can see, actually, we'll take that gap up away. You can see what happened here. This came down, did the opposing trend, came into the zone, came out, tried to undercut this low, and as this turned up, and we came back up through to the upside. You had a pretty nice little trade here for a move up, that would have gotten you a couple of targets, or you could have just gone for 2-to-1 or something like that. So I just wanted to use this sort of as an example. So there's different ways to use these grid patterns. I know I use the standard 4 or 5, but sometimes if you want to look at a lot of charts at the same time, and I found this to be really useful to keep me away from looking at the smaller time frame. I wanted to look at the higher time frame first and then go look at the smaller time frame if I saw something interesting. All right, let's go ahead and get into the individual requests that came through. So PCG. So let's start with the monthly chart, because this has made a nice turn, right? I mean, this is pretty good look to the reversal pattern that's taking place. We're getting the MACD coming up. We are getting green DI starting to show some light. We even got some volume coming in. So that's telling me that the underlying bias is improving. However, from there, I want to go and look for a pattern, a potential buy pattern. And if I'm looking at this right now, we've made a move up, we pulled back, and we made a higher high. MACD is making a lower peak, a dramatically lower peak, and so is the ADX. So it doesn't necessarily mean this is going to fall apart, but what it tells me is I probably don't want to buy this pullback. I think this is going to be a little bit more complex. I bet it's going to consolidate a little bit longer. We could see this pullback a little bit deeper into bigger support. And then I think we could start to take a harder look at this. Maybe it's somewhere around $15 or something like that, maybe a little bit higher, but there's nothing really to do until we start to see some improvement on the daily chart, which is starting to turn down. So good longer term pattern, but we want to wait for a little bit better entry. Let's look at AMD. I mean, one of the things, so this was actually a request from a while back, but I do know, so this is a perfect setup in my work. It's right out of my book. Pinch play here after crossing the 0 line. We got improving ADX on the weekly. We get the pullback. And then we had the 1, 2, 3. We had overrun here. So this is a 1, 2, 3 like this. We had overrun. So we know we don't want to play the 1. We want to wait for this higher low. That higher low happened to be a 0 line reversal with low ADX on this time frame. And look at the move. I know I've talked to a specific subscriber that I know played this, and these are the types of things you want to be on the lookout for if you're using the strategies that I'm showing you. We are coming up against some resistance here at 126. You can see it on these prior peaks, this prior peak here. So somewhere around 125 is probably a pretty good target area for this. But as long as the momentum is confirming, I think you can stick with this and trail a stop. Okay, so this is actually Palladium Trust, and it's trying to turn the corner. So one of the things I like to look at is we've got this kind of key level here on the monthly chart, and we undercut that low. We had kind of a nasty bar. Let's look at this more closely. You see this nasty bar? That's a big breakdown. You took out that low, that low, that low on a really ugly bar. But look at what happened since then. There was no follow through to the downside. And in fact, we had a narrow range bar after that, and now we've kind of lifted off. So now what I'm on the lookout for is a undercut and rally setup. So the only way we can get that is if this can hold on this pullback. We're coming back down and testing this area. If this can turn up from here without giving back too much more, then it starts to intrigue me, because I'm feeling like we had a chance to turn this lower and it's not doing that. But it's too early to make a call right here. We want to see a little bit of improvement, and we're going to want to see a turn on the daily chart to give us a sign that it's ready to get going. But we got to hold here right around 12. AEHR. So we're a little awkward in the way this is set up. The pullback was a little deep, and so we still have rising moving averages. So yeah, it is a setup. You could argue we've got this higher bottom, right? We made a higher low here. We made a lower low here. It is a reverse divergence. It's just awkward, and the reason why I keep saying it's awkward is because of this monster red bar with follow-through. You have this ugly, ugly reversal with follow-through, and by the time you're getting in, it's a little tight whether you think you can make money in this or not. So not saying that it won't work. What I think is going to happen is we're working up towards this resistance. I bet what happens is we form something like this. The next time, so this maybe fails and comes down like that. Well, next time this turns back up, I would be very, very interested in this. You've had people that got caught in this, had a chance to get out. Then we get another opportunity on the next time around. The bigger picture pattern on this is still pretty good. It was just the violence of the reversal that bothers me with this big gap and everything. Okay, let's look at KO. So this is kind of the nature of the beast right now. And what I've been telling my subscribers is we want to look at two things. We want to look at the move to the upside, but then we want to look at the pullback. This was a stock that I was definitely watching based on the way this was playing out. We had a spike low. We were kind of forming a higher low on really good support. And then we want to look for a pullback. But look, this is not an orderly pullback. You see the size of the bars growing? That is not what we want to find. We actually want the opposite. We want the size of the bars to be shrinking. And then we can go and see that we got this violent move to the downside and the ADX is actually climbing here. So this is a no-go for me. We've rebroken these lines. And I know the guy who asked this already knows this now, but it's good. It's a good philosophy to understand there's two parts to the trade. There's the up move and then there's the pullback. And we want to watch the pullback. If the pullback is orderly, then we want to play and look for a trigger. If the pullback is not orderly, then there's a no trade. This is back into the list of stocks. And really now we need this to break out through 65. We know 65 is a serious problem for this thing. All right. Okay, let's look at Home Depot. So what I want you to do, the person who was asking me about this, so they're isolating the fact that the MACD is coming back down to the zero line. And I couldn't agree more. I don't think there's much downside in this. So when I'm doing analysis for my institutional clients and they give me a call, they'll say, hey, what do you think of this? I'm going to say, look, I don't think there's much downside in this at all. Okay, but that's analysis. That's not necessarily trading because if I'm trading, I'm looking for one thing. And if I'm going long, I have to be pulling there's one of two things that have to happen. I either have a low ADX pattern, right? Low ADX, and I'm looking for a breakout, or I have a strong move to the upside and I'm looking for a pullback to a rising 18. Well, I don't have a rising 18 here. I don't have a rising 18 here. I don't have a rising 18 here. I don't have strong ADX, or strong ADX. So the question you have to ask, is this a low ADX pattern? I don't see it yet. So do I agree with your analysis? I do. I don't think there's much downside, but we have to wait for a sign of strength here. We got to get some movement going and then a pullback. Or we need a longer period of consolidation and a longer ADX to get that low ADX condition in place. So the thought process is correct, but we have to be a trader now. We have done the analysis. Yeah, this is a stock we want to kind of watch, but from a trading standpoint, we need a signal. And one of those two ADX patterns is what I'd be looking for. PLL. So this is pretty intriguing, I think. We've had sort of a rough market environment here, and this is forming this big wedge, right? I mean, this is pretty interesting. Now, the same thing goes, though. Do we have a low ADX breakout pattern developing, or do we have a pullback pattern? Like, do we have strength? So we don't really have either one. The problem with the breakout pattern is we'd have to go all the way up to 75. So we'd have to go up 25 points to break out. It's a little bit too much for me. So if it does move up and break out, I'm going to be looking for a pullback play after that, or at least a higher pivot low to form, because I don't want to buy a breakout when it's overbought. So we've been kind of low, but not really low on an ADX basis. There's a lot of good going on here. I like what the pattern is. Again, from an analysis standpoint, I'm saying, look, this is something I really like the look of, but it's got to get through 75 before I'd have that much interest. Okay, so TNET has made a nice move to the upside, but it's just kind of getting going on a momentum basis, and it's already starting to pull back. So I guess I would consider this on a pullback to the 18, but I got to tell you, I'm not a huge fan of these patterns where you just barely go to a new high. You see how it just gets above these key levels and already starts to pull back? So it makes me wonder. I would be watching the pullback very carefully. I wouldn't be aggressive on a pullback. I'd be watching to see if there's any signs of kind of greater selling, then we know we got to take more care, more time, let this 18-month cup around a little bit more before it really will be ready to go. Now, again, on a bigger picture, I like the looks of this here. You can see this reversal pattern taking place, but hopefully you understand why on a momentum basis it's maybe not quite ready yet. So LECO, so this is one that meets the requirements of rising moving averages, right? But in the ADX on the MACD on the last new high confirmed. But then on the pullback, it was a little deep. We had kind of a big red bar, and we have overcome that, and now we're working sideways. I want to zero in on this for a second, but look at what's happened. The MACD is still kind of lagging. So if I see this big red bar, we've kind of overcome that, and now we're stalling out. Because of what the MACD is doing, I really want to see this come up through this area here. If we go to the daily, you can see it a little bit more clearly. We want to see this work its way through, really get through this resistance zone here. And I'd like to see it with green DI popping as well. So I wouldn't be in a big hurry here unless I get confirmation. I'd love to see a big green bar with some volume and some green DI. Thanks for joining me. My contact information is listed. And if you have any stock requests, send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.